This morning we're going to carry on looking at a passage from Philippians, really creative title, Confidence in. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the verses. I'm going to read them from the NLT, and we will carry on from there. Philippians chapter 3, and we are reading starting from verse 1. Whatever happens, my dear brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. I never get tired of telling you these things, and I do it to safeguard your faith. Watch out for those dogs, those people who do evil, those mutilators who say you must be circumcised to be saved. For we who worship by the Spirit of God are the ones who are truly circumcised. We rely on what Christ Jesus has done for us. We put no confidence in human effort, though I could have confidence in my own effort if anyone could. Indeed, if others have reason for confidence in their own effort, I have even more. I was circumcised when I was 8 days old. I am a pure-blooded citizen of Israel and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. By the way, Benjamin, best name. A real Hebrew. Probably was born in May as well. Anyway, a real Hebrew, if there ever was one. I was a member of the Pharisees who demand the strictest obedience to the Jewish law. I was so zealous that I harshly persecuted the church. And as for righteousness, I obeyed the law without fault. I once thought these things were valuable, but now I consider them worthless because of what Christ has done. Yes, everything else is worthless when compared with the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For this sake, I have discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage, so that I could gain Christ and become one with him. I no longer count on my own righteousness through obeying the law. Rather, I become righteous through faith in Christ. For God's way of making us right with himself depends on faith. I want to know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. I want to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that one way or another I will experience the resurrection from the dead. Whew! Nice, friendly, happy passage for us to look at this morning. You know, one of the things I like about the Bible is it's not like always fluffy, nice and lovely. There is stuff that's quite meaty and sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, but it's really good if we are able to dig into it and glean one or two things from it. And then probably the next time we look at it, we'll gather something else and so on and so forth. But as we look at these verses this morning, and having just had this weird illustration I gave with Easter eggs about chocolate, my educated guess is that some of you are going, what on earth is he talking about? How on earth does that relate to this? Well, hopefully you'll get it by the end of this morning. But before we go into that, I wonder how your week was. I wonder how things have been for you over the last few days. I wonder if you've had to ponder something this week. Has someone shared with you part of their stories, things that are going on in their life? Now, I've had the privilege of hearing a few people's stories recently, and it's always encouraging to me when I can hear what's going on in people's lives. Some may say there are coincidences that happen in people's lives. I'm not too sure. When you're talking about their faith journey, sometimes these coincidences seem to happen too often to be coincidences. Some may say that these coincidences are just amazing. I would say it is often in hindsight when we hear somebody's story and we see what has happened that we can see that God has used these events these incidents, these so-called coincidences, to draw people closer to him. And this morning, as we look at this little bit of Paul's letter to the Philippians, we have a passage where Paul shares a little bit of his story, but in a different way. Once again, Paul is not boasting to say, look at me, I'm how wonderful I am. But he uses his background, his history, how he was brought up, to contrast himself with others who are stating one needs to be circumcised to be fully saved. Paul is straight to the point, goes straight to the point. He's actually rather blunt in his response. He calls those who say they must be circumcised to be saved dogs. Hands up, people who have a dog, love their dog. Hands up those who have a cat. Okay, no you don't, the cat has you, But different in those times to today. Okay? Like I've told you before, we lived in Alice Springs and we traveled around, and if you go out into some of the communities, you would see packs of dogs rummaging around in these small communities, a few 100 kilometers out of Alice Springs. Sometimes these dogs are the ugliest looking things. They're scraggly looking dogs and they're running all over the place. You have to be careful of them. They are just, I don't know. I like dogs in a way, but not these things. Here, at this time, dogs were despised. So to call someone a dog is a very derogatory term. Yet it seems Paul has chosen this word carefully. It appears he is really emphasizing a point. Dogs were seen as unclean animals. So Paul is flipping things upside down. In a way, he's saying those who want to make what they consider unclean people clean by forcing them to be circumcised are in fact unclean. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but let me say it again. Those that believe that they are clean and want to make unclean people clean, Paul is calling that, saying that is unclean. What we may notice is that it is not the circumcision that is the issue, it is the being required to be circumcised. It is you have to do A, B, C, D, E before you can become a Christian. Before you can be a real follower of Christ, you've got to do A, B, C, D, E. Before you scratch your head and say, how could people come to that conclusion? How could people come to this weird conclusion that you have to become circumcised to be saved? Perhaps we should examine ourselves. Are we putting stumbling blocks in the way of others? Are we telling others you have to do A, B, C, D before you can really become a Christian? There's a movie coming out in, I think it's out in the States now, but it's coming out in a few months. I can't even remember the title of the movie. It's about the Jesus movement that happened in the States in the 60s when a number of hippies came to know Jesus. Now, one of the stories that I absolutely love in and around that time is some leaders in a church came to their pastor and said, we've noticed these hippies, they're spending all the time on the beach, they're coming in bare feet, shorts, they've walked off the beach and they're walking into our church, and we've just got nice new carpet down in our church. You need to do something about that. And this pastor was very clever, way cleverer than I would have been at that moment. He said, you're right. If this carpet is causing issues, a stumbling block to them coming to know Jesus, let's get rid of the carpet. No. That's not what I meant. is what they said. Well, eventually they managed to work through the things, and a number of people were able to come. So the carpet may be a stumbling block. It may be what you have to wear. It may be how, a number of things. Now, I am not saying that certain things are not important. But my God's big enough to work on things for people. If He wants this person here to not walk around in bare feet and shorts and stuff, which I don't think God cares about, but if He didn't want that, He can tell them that. If I'm going to say that you can't come to church because of the type of clothes you're wearing, then I'm telling you now, you need to get rid of me fast. What do we really need to do? Is it our attitudes, our spoken or our unspoken words that are becoming a stumbling block for other people to come to know Jesus? Are we actually preaching Jesus and something? This is all about coming to Jesus and you got to look nice. This is all about coming to Jesus and you've got to do A, B, C, D. Paul was clear. It's not because he is a pure-blooded citizen of Israel, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, a real Hebrew, a member of the Pharisees who demanded the strictest obedience to the Jewish law. It is not about how zealous he was or that he obeyed the law without fault. In fact, Paul states, all of that is rubbish to him compared to knowing Christ. Now, this is where the other thing I want to emphasize a bit too is there's another part in the Bible we may remember where God says, or Jesus says, God says, you know, if you're going to come follow me, you have to give up your family. And people get confused with that. They're like, but God tells us we've got to care for people. We've got to love people. We've got to love our family. And then here it appears that he's saying that you don't. It's not that you don't love your family. It's the comparison. You know? Chocolate, my little Easter egg. I like my little Easter egg. But compared to my family, that's nothing. Okay? And in a way, I love my family, but compared to Christ, it should be, that's a pretty hard thing to say. And to be honest, I don't do that often. It's not you ignore. So Paul wants people to care about others, to do these things, to be the person that you are created to be, but God is more important than that. God's more important than your job, more important than your car, more important than your house, more important than your family, more important than chocolate. Battery went flat. Thanks, Ben. If we look back at the first few verses, there's something else I want us to look at. It says in these verses, watch out for those dogs, those people who do evil, those mutilators who say you must be circumcised to be saved. Those. It's a different group he's talking about. Those people over there that are saying this. And they're saying you have to do this. What does Paul do? He says, for we who worship in the Spirit, we rely on what Christ has done for us. He's contrasting a group of people who would say they are followers of Jesus, some of them, with another group, the church in Philippi. He's saying we, us. He's contrasting. He's putting himself with others. We now can also be included in that we. But what one scholar wrote was the we is you and us. The Gentiles and Jews together. That's the we that he's talking about, that Paul's talking about. God is reminding us. That we, Jews and Gentiles together, the true people of God. The Gentile doesn't need to become a Jew to become part of God's family. Through Christ and Christ alone, all can be part of God's family. Now, before someone thinks I am saying something I am not, let me be clear again. I am not saying all people are part of God's family. I am not saying we can do whatever we want and still be part of God's family. I am saying it is only through worshiping Christ, having faith in Him, that anyone can be part of God's family. Sometimes I have thought, even though the words may seem a little harsh, that it's easy for Paul to say things like that. God appeared to him in some miraculous way, so that anyone would have confidence like Paul did. Paul doesn't understand what it's like some 2,000 years later, living in East Auckland in 2023. It's a very different situation than what he had. He knew all this stuff. God appeared to him. He sort of went blind for a while. Someone prayed for him. He got healed. He could see everything. It's easy for him. If I was Paul, it would be fine. I'd be fine. I wouldn't have a problem. I'd say what I want because I'd have so much confidence. Really? Would I? Let me tell you a little story I heard. I was talking to someone this morning about the person who told me this story. Anyway, this guy I used to study with, is a pastor in a different church. And years ago, he used to work for YWAM. Anyone not know what YWAM is? But everyone knows what YWAM is. Fantastic. Youth Without Any Money? Oh, no, sorry. Youth with a Mission, organisation that travels around, trains people up, and then sends young people to different places so that they're able to engage. So he worked in a band with YWAM, did all these amazing things. He was at some concert thing somewhere overseas, don't know where it was. Anyway, and they had like a little booth, and on it they said, "Come in and we'll pray for you." And this girl walked in, and I don't know the whole story, so I don't know all the details, but there was something wrong with her arm, quite seriously wrong with her arm, and they prayed for it, and she was healed instantly. One of those miraculous stories that you hear, and you think, man, that'd be so cool to see. I haven't really had many of those, if any, that I can name. Okay? So, like Paul, God does something, poof, miraculously, she's healed. Great. Now, the rest of the story is what sort of encourages me. That young woman no longer has anything to do with church. How on earth does that encourage me? She had some seriously wrong thing with her arm, and God healed her, and now she has nothing to do with Christ. Well, the reason that story heals me, that story encourages me, is that seeing things, even a miraculous healing, isn't enough. That's not what's going to save you. If God can do something miraculous like that, and you can still walk away and still now say, I don't believe in God, then there's got to be something more to this. People If we read the Bible, people walked with Jesus, not with just seeing somebody get healed. They walked with Jesus. And they went, nah, walked away. People saw Jesus do miraculous things and went, too hard, and walked away. People were there with Jesus and heard these stories, saw these things, and still walked away or didn't come to him. You see, it's not Jesus and whatever. It's Jesus. Paul gives us a safeguard so that we don't make it Jesus and, so that we don't walk away. And that safeguard is through faith. And he tells us, how do we do that? By encouraging us to keep sharing our stories, to keep telling each other what God has done. It is through faith in God, it is God's grace, not our ability or our heritage, that saves us. Now, my chocolate illustration has huge limitations. Perhaps you are still confused at how it relates to what we've just looked at. Paul could have held on to his heritage. He could have been promoting circumcision as he was a true Jew. But he realized nothing was as important as Christ. And unlike good things, he would never let go of the ultimate thing. The difference being, unlike chocolate, a good thing, well, too much of it, perhaps not. Holding on to Christ is this two-way thing. Christ is holding on to us. He is welcoming us and others to his table. Paul was blunt. He didn't sugarcoat things. He said, I want to know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. I want to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that one way or another I will experience the resurrection from the dead. There's nothing I can hold on to that is as valuable as that. Really? Can I say that is what I really want? I can say it, but do I mean it really? What are we willing to offer up to Christ? Things that we value, good things, but in comparison to Christ, they're nothing. How do I have confidence in this? Well, we're going to share in communion, and I don't think there's a better illustration. We come to Christ as we are, with all our strengths and all our weaknesses, all our good points and all our faults. But it's Christ who is the one that is welcoming us and drawing us in. So